Thank you so much for talking with me, sir. I really appreciate it. I absolutely love season one of Servant, one of my favorite shows that has quickly become one of my favorite shows of all time. Just as incredible as season one. So I love it.
Thank you so much.
Of course. So I'm actually in Delaware. I'm from Delaware. So I love checking out, like, oh, that looks like it's near Spruce Street and stuff like that in the show. But speaking of locations, the house, the Turner house, is really a character in itself in the show. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, one of the aspects of this premise that I love so much is it takes place in one location. Can you make an entire show in one location? I love that kind of play-like quality of it. And so this idea that we're going to stay in this brownstone on Spruce Street in Philadelphia and never leave it and only see the outside world through devices here and there was very exciting for me. And I think Apple, I think when I first told them that was what we were going to do, I don't think they believed me. They thought, okay, well, the pilot, okay, that's wow, the whole pilot was in the house. That's amazing. And then the second episode, the third episode, the fourth episode, and they're like, wow, we're still in the house. And then the whole first season. And then I think when it really became like, wait, he's dead serious is when they saw the first episode of the second season. They were like, you're going to stay in the house? And I'm like, we're staying in the house. That's what we're going to do. And then the idea that I have is that we're going to expand what we're calling the house every season. So in second season, there's a whole section of the house that you never saw before. That's now a part of the storytelling. And then in the third season, there's another whole aspect that you're going to see that you haven't seen.
And so I'm already getting like intrigued. So for season one, if I had
Yeah.
to, in my, if I had to give a theme to it, I would say grief.
Hmm.
Season two, would you say is more about power, or what would you say the theme is?
Well, I've talked to the writers this way. I said season one is essentially what happened to Jericho. What is the trauma that's hanging over this family? And then season two is what is this cult? And what is Leanne a part of? Where did she come from? And then I have one for the remaining two seasons. What each of those are, and so that's the structure. Emotionally, I think the whole show is these two storylines: a family that's refusing to mourn, and the provenance of Leanne. Where is she from, and what happened to her? On top of it.
I love it. Another thing that I enjoy is the food seems to be, or is very much a centerpiece of the show in many ways throughout the, both seasons. What is that? I personally haven't figured it out yet, if it even means anything at all. But what is it? Am I missing something? Am I, can you give a little bit of insight into that?
When I think Tony put it in the original pilot, and the earlier episodes. I think it came from his culinary background, and both he and I think, really didn't realize how powerful it was. But we kept on wanting it and putting it in, and I started to realize it was almost a way of seeing life, all aspects of life. You're killing something. You're creating something. The ripping, the tearing of flesh, the cutting, the things that are delivered to their house that are alive, that are not alive, the perfectionism of it, the art of it, all of that stuff happening because we never leave the house. These things are really powerful, and they have a quality to them that feels like you're experiencing wars or things that are larger, and yet we take that for granted. We don't think about what it's like to pluck the feathers off of something, but when we spend an episode on that, you're kind of shocked at, oh my God, that's what happens before I eat that chicken or that goose, and you start thinking about all those things. I've found it very sensual, and it's part of the decadence of the show. The show is about a family that's kind of posh in Philadelphia, and they dress a certain way, and they go to these events, and they have parties, and they eat and drink wine, and have these extravagant meals, but they're not dealing with this tragedy that's happened. They'll do anything but deal with this tragedy.
That's thank you very much. I mean, that puts a lot of perspective into it for me. By the way, it also makes me want to be a anchor in Philadelphia on like KYW or whatever. I love that. But I'm just kidding, iHeart. But but the other thing that I think is very interesting, and this is more broader, is you have a plan for finality in this, where some of my other favorite shows, The X-Files and Lost, and that wasn't the plan from the beginning. Why was that important to you for Servant to know, I want to tell this story in X amount of half hour ish, episodes, and then I want the story to end there?
I think if you on those two examples that you gave, I don't think it's quite as important for X-Files because that's more of an episodic kind of, we're solving a mystery every single episode kind of, show. It's not as important that where the two characters are going necessarily and where the show would end. But for a show like Lost, when you're doing a mystery, a puzzle, you should know where you're going. I think otherwise, there will be a lot of false doors and things that really don't mean anything because you didn't know why you put them in there to begin with, and then you have to jam them in to an ending. I didn't want to be cornered at the end. I wanted to be the ending to be revelatory to all of it. An inevitable thing, a journey that makes it so you go back and you watch it and it feels more satisfying.
I love that. And one of the, again, many, many, many things that I love about Servant, and it's so masterful at, is it's a journey every episode. You have the larger story, but each episode has its own journey for all of the characters, really. And I was talking to Toby and Lauren about this, that for season one, in my opinion, I really felt bad for Lauren in many ways. Like, oh, she's a victim, and oh, it's so sad that she's like kind of delusional and all that. And it seems much different in season two. And Toby or Sean, where in season one, I'm like, come on, bro, like that's what I would do too. I would try to protect my wife and blah 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 blah. Where in season two, I'm like, is everybody making the right choices? Are there any right choices here? You know, it's very complex, which is like all of us, right? I mean, we're not black and white. And I think it's so masterful that Servant does that. The different layers of the characters are representative of layers of us. It's not a two-dimensional, one-dimensional character that you see on screen like so many other shows and movies and stuff. It's very, very deeply layered, and again, I just think that's absolutely masterful.
Oh, thank you, man. So kind. I do believe that at the center of it, the what happened to Jericho, which you learn in season one, in episode 9 of season one, is so hard to internalize. It's so hard to deal with that's the engine that's doing all this stuff that you're talking about. It justifies any dark action, any good action, any belief system, because it's why I was very interested in the show. Is when I saw this documentary on a father who forgot his child in the car, and it was so, and the child passed away. He left him the car in the sun, and it was just so upsetting. And how could there be a God? How could there be anything good in the world if that can happen? Because there's no lesson to be learned. There's nothing. there's no growth that's coming. He was a good man who loved his kid, you know, and just forgot, you know. And that's been, you know, I think in a way, something that's driving me, you know, in the show, just to think for episodes after episodes about, you know, do I believe there's something good out there, or am I just gonna get dark, you know? And I flip flop a lot, you know, on that. And so you when I tell my movies and now this show, they're dealing with things I'm struggling with, or I want to learn more about my feelings about them. And this is that, you know, when you something like somebody dies of a disease or something, you can say, oh well, you know, that was meant to be, and you know, and I can cherish who they were, and they went and got to, you know, you find some way. But this incident and incidents like it feels like there's nothing good about it at all. There's no way to spin this in any way. And that's what I think the characters are struggling with, and that engine underneath everything is the power of the show.
Thank you. And finally, you know, and this I kind of what you just said kind of, you know, prodded me to really realize this is that each character is dealing with, you know, this loss in very, very different ways, but they're all, you know, dealing with it. Um, and that's very, very interesting to me. You know, it's very interesting to me how one is just almost delusional with grief and the other has turned to, you know, drugs and liquor, and the other is kind of trying to be the hero, the protector. It's just I love it.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah, this idea that they're not having this conversation is, you know, I guess in a romantic, you know, an unrequited love show, you never let the two of them actually say I love you to each other. And in this show, they're not actually ever having the conversation that they need to have with each other, which because they're scared of what's going to happen on the other side of that conversation, which we totally get, why they're avoiding it.
Wow. Well, thank you, sir. I really, really appreciate your time. I cannot wait for
Thank you.
everybody to see season 2, and I'm looking forward to 3 and 4. So let's bring it on.
Thanks, my man. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. You as well, sir.